You are 21 years old, and fate has already handed you the blueprint for immortality. Your father built a kingdom. Your tutor is Aristotle. Your body is trained for war. Your mind is sharpened for empire. Every story around your birth says the same thing. You were not made for comfort. You were made to bend history. And then the phone arrives, not as a tool, not as some innocent invention, not as progress. It arrives like a tiny glowing god in your palm, demanding tribute and attention, draining devotion from everything greater than itself. At first it seems harmless, a curiosity, a miracle of light, a screen bright as captured lightning, a window that shows you every face, every city, every opinion, every pleasure, every humiliation, instantly. But no one tells you what blue light does to the brain. No one tells you it hijacks the oldest systems in the mind, that the human brain is not built for endless novelty, that every swipe trains the reward circuit to crave surprise over discipline, that every short burst of stimulation teaches your neurons to reject stillness, that your dopamine system, once reserved for survival, conquest, strategy, risk, and meaning, gets rewired to chase interruption. The blue light hits your eyes before dawn. It tells your brain the sun is already up. It delays melatonin, it blunts sleep, it fractures recovery, it keeps the nervous system slightly elevated, slightly restless, slightly hungry, even in silence. And that is how destiny begins to leak, because greatness is not only built in battle, it is built in the invisible hours, in deep sleep, in sustained thought, in the ability to hold one idea long enough to turn it into a civilization. But the phone makes depth feel unbearable. Now imagine Alexander with that device. Alexander, who once stood over maps and saw continents. Alexander, who could ride for days, study terrain, memorize weaknesses, absorb languages, read men's fear, and convert chaos into victory. Now he wakes up and checks notifications before he checks the horizon. Before India, before Persia, before the next campaign. Before the logistics of grain, horses, river crossings, siege towers, morale, weather, rebellion. He checks who viewed his story, and something ancient inside him begins to rot. Not immediately. That is the genius of the phone. It does not destroy destiny in one blow. It dissolves it by fractions, a delayed morning, a distracted counsel, a shorter attention span in war briefings, a need for stimulation during silence. An irritation when strategy takes too long, a twitch toward the screen whenever reality becomes difficult. The mind that should be mastering empires is now being conditioned by 30-second bursts of spectacle. He no longer measures victory by what can be built, secured, unified, or endured. He begins measuring it by what can be seen, by what can be reacted to, by what can be envied. And this is where history changes. Because Alexander the Great did not become Alexander through force alone. He became Alexander because his will was uninterrupted, because his ambition outlived comfort, because he could remain fixed on something larger than pleasure. The phone introduces a new sovereign, fragmentation. Now, Gaugamela is no longer a sacred military event. It is content. The charge at the Persian center becomes a clip. The siege of Tyre becomes a montage. The Gordian knot becomes a trend sound. The crossing into Asia becomes drone footage and captions. And the algorithm does not care about greatness. That is the humiliation. The algorithm does not reward the most disciplined man, it rewards the most addictive sequence, the most consumable emotion, the fastest hook, the cheapest curiosity, the cleanest loop of envy, outrage, vanity, lust, and spectacle. So Alexander begins to adapt to the machine, not because he is weak, but because even great men are vulnerable when a system is engineered to exploit attention itself. He starts shortening speeches, then shortening plans, then shortening thought. He wants war meetings to move faster. He grows impatient with complexity. He stops listening fully. He mistakes stimulation for momentum, and soon the men notice. The companions see their king looking downward more than forward. Parmenion is explaining supply vulnerabilities, but Alexander is half listening because some Athenian comedian is mocking Macedonian armor, and the clip already has 1 million views. The scouts return with reports on terrain, Persian movement, weak flanks, seasonal risk, And Alexander is distracted by commentary under his last post. Overrated conqueror. Philip built the kingdom. Bro thinks he's Achilles, and that would sound funny. If it were not fatal, because kings do not fall only by sword, they fall by misallocation of attention. One neglected report becomes a delayed maneuver. One delayed maneuver becomes a broken formation. One broken formation becomes dead cavalry. One dead cavalry officer means no one covers the flank. One exposed flank becomes panic. Panic becomes rumor. Rumor becomes collapse. That is how the domino effect begins, and it spreads beyond Alexander. Because the disease of distraction never remains private. His generals start copying him. His officers begin caring how they appear more than how they command. Soldiers once forged by hunger, mud, steel, and obedience now crave entertainment between marches. Campfires once used for tactical review become circles of passive scrolling. Men sleep later, wake slower, complain more, compare constantly. No one is present anymore. Even courage changes. Before the phone, courage meant enduring fear for something greater. After the phone, courage starts to mutate into performance. Men don't ask, "What is honorable?" They ask, "How will this look?" Now even sacrifice becomes theater. A soldier no longer throws himself into battle purely for king and country. He imagines the retelling, the clip, the attention, the immortality of visibility. And when visibility replaces meaning, the soul of the army dies even before the body does, because an empire cannot be held together by distracted men. A phalanx only works when each man is locked into purpose, shield to shield, breath to breath. No vanity, no fragmentation, no private world pulling him away from the collective. But the phone creates 10,000 private worlds. Now every man carries a separate kingdom in his hand, a kingdom of temptation, a kingdom of comparison, a kingdom where his real life always feels smaller than what flashes on the screen. That is the true conquest. Not Persia, not Egypt, not Babylon. The phone conquers the interior. It colonizes attention. It occupies stillness. It invades sleep. It weakens memory. It conditions the brain to expect reward without effort and stimulation without meaning. And once that happens, fate itself begins to rewire. Because history is not only made by events, history is made by what people are able to focus on long enough to become. If Alexander had a phone in the age when he was meant to become legend, maybe he never becomes legend at all. Maybe he never studies Achilles deeply enough to mirror him. Maybe he never develops the obsessive clarity to unite Greece. Maybe he never learns to read battlefield geometry with that eerie precision. Maybe he hesitates. Maybe he delays. Maybe he chooses the easier pleasure one too many times. Maybe he stays in Macedon, half inspired, half entertained, fully distracted, rich in stimulation and poor in destiny. Maybe Persia survives. Maybe Egypt is never taken. Maybe Alexandria is never founded. Maybe East and West never fuse in the same way. Maybe no myth of world conquest echoes through history. Maybe Caesar grows up without Alexander as his impossible benchmark. Maybe Napoleon never whispers his name in envy. Maybe the architecture of ambition itself changes. All because one man kept reaching for the glow instead of the horizon. And it does not stop with him. His mother would notice the distance in his eyes. His generals would feel the thinning of command. His men would inherit his habits. His enemies would exploit the lag. His empire would be built shakier, held shorter, remembered smaller. Because when the center of a man weakens, everything orbiting him weakens too. That is what the phone does. It is not just a device, it is a multiplier of fragmentation. It turns leaders into reactors, warriors into spectators, thinkers into consumers, purpose into appetite. And the darkest part is this: the phone never asks to ruin your life. It only asks for a minute before sleep, a minute before work, a minute during the meeting, a minute while someone is talking, a minute while the map is still open, a minute while history is waiting. And enough stolen minutes can erase an empire. So now, picture him. Alexander, son of Philip, student of Aristotle, chosen by mythology, built for conquest, standing in the palace of Darius after victory. The world opened before him. India ahead, immortality within reach, and instead of hearing destiny, he hears the buzz. He looks down. The screen lights up his face in cold blue, the same blue that confuses the body, agitates the mind, delays sleep, scatters thought, rewards impulse, weakens discipline. His men are waiting for orders, but he is reading comments, and in that moment, history does not end with an explosion. It ends with erosion. No dramatic final battle, no heroic fall, just the slow replacement of meaning with stimulation, of mission with metrics, of fate with feed. Alexander the Great does not lose to Persia. He loses to the rectangle. And the most terrifying part, he would not be the only one. Because in any age, the thing that controls attention controls civilization.